any additional stuff to the file, and it has stopped automatically. I could have written the script in a way that it does give me feedback, through the GUI, but I just didn't do it at the time.
Not a very good example to set for your students.
Catching all the mistakes, all the exceptions, right? Yep. All right, so now we have the space to do it. Let's go ahead and save the file. Come on.
The audio still works. Audio still works.
Yeah, the audio is still sent to the right channel, the same channel as before. It's just being very slow and it's updating the file system. Oops. I save it as untitled. Let's save it again. Yes, override. Insufficient user rights. Okay. Okay. Oh, I forgot. I need to do save as. 5L1.
Actually, it is untitled. If it is untitled, you know what it is.
I don't see any problems. All right, we'll just save it as untitled for the time being. Okay. All right, so we are ready to trace this code. There are no conditions to trace, so there's no need for a column called comments. We can start with line number. And we do have one global variable. Which one is our global variable? HP, okay? It's it stands for hit points. So we'll start with unknown here as my precondition. Now, it is important to see that D is not a global variable, okay? D is, as I said, a bi-val parameter, acts and behave, and in many ways is almost exactly the same as a local variable. And local variables do not exist until the subroutine is invoked. It's the same way with a bi-val parameter. It's just like a local variable. It does not exist until I invoke the subroutine. Then it starts to exist. So the next line to execute is line 6, or the first line of the program is line 6. Line 6 is initializing HP to 200, pretty easy stuff. We go to line 7. Line 7 is the invocation, which means we have to reserve one column for return line number, and it returns to post. But because D is just like a local variable, it also means that we have to reserve the space for D when we invoke the subroutine, just as if D is a local variable. Is that part okay? Do you guys see the similarity between D as a bi-val parameter with a local variable? Do you see the similarities? So now we reserve one column for D. Now, if D were a local variable, we would have put a question mark here because all local variables start with some unspecified value. But since D is a bi-val parameter, the initial value is now specified by the invoke statement itself. The invoke statement is specifying that D should start with a value of -5. And as a result, column D, which represents parameter D, will start with a value of -5. Okay? In other words, that's the only change. That's the only difference between a local variable and a bi-val parameter. Are there any questions at this point? Yep.
Why couldn't we do like
D going into the 5, like on the next line?
Because that would look just like a assignment statement, and that's exactly the intent for me, is to make sure it does not look like an assignment statement. But other than that, yes, I could have, taken a opposite direction and then just reverse the order of the two sides. Yep.
What does bival stand for?
By value. By value. That's basically it, the name of the method of passing information into a subroutine. Okay. So now we are inside the subroutine. The first line to trace is no longer line 2 because by val d is just like local d. It is a declaration. All it is saying is to make sure that we understand that d is a parameter passed by value. But there's really nothing to do. It doesn't add anything to d, does not subtract anything from d. All it is saying is, oh, there's a parameter called d. So the first line, or the only line that does anything useful in subroutine change xp, is line 3. Line 3 is doing something that we should know how to do already. Evaluate the right-hand side, which is xp plus d. xp is still referring to column B, which has a value of 200. D refers to column D, which is the parameter D. It has a value of -5. 200 plus -5 is 195. We store the result back to XP, so XP now has a value of 195. Are we okay so far? This part has nothing to do with D being a parameter because local variables would behave exactly the same way anyway. Then we go to line 4. And on line 4, we're at the end of a subroutine. We have to know where to go back to, and that's indicated by column C, the return line number column. It tells us that we have to go back to post. That's fine. But at the same time, on line 4, we also have to deallocate everything that we have allocated for this invocation of change XP. That means we have to deallocate not only the return line number column, but also the column that we have reserved for parameter D. But has this behavior changed because D is a by val parameter instead of a local variable? Nope, we do exactly the same thing. So that's why I said a by val parameter is just like a local variable, except its initial value is not only specified, it is specified by the invoke statement itself. Do we have any questions at this point with passing by value? The main purpose of by val parameter is to serve as an in-tray into a subroutine. If you look at a subroutine as a cubicle or an office, the by val parameter is just like an in-tray. It allows someone from outside or potentially outside to pass information into a subroutine for processing purposes. Okay? But it does not let any information out because whatever you do to a by val parameter stays only within the invocation of the subroutine. When the subroutine returns, it is also gone. Okay? Do we have any questions about that? Well, let's look at the second example. Okay, so this is the first example, and we'll go ahead and look at the second one. Okay, the recording's still going on, that's good. We'll take a look at a second example. The second example, we'll just do the swap subroutine, okay? The swap subroutine will exchange the value of two particular things. So we'll say define sub, and we'll call this swap. It has a local variable. Well, let's list all the parameters first. By val x, by val y, and local t. Okay, so t is my local variable. The other two are by value parameters. And the code to exchange the value is to store the value of x first. X gets the value of y gets the old value of x, which is now stored in t, and define sub. And outside of the subroutine, I can have two global variables. I can have one global variable I. Let's initialize that to 5, and let's have k initialized to 15. Doesn't matter what it is. And then we invoke the subroutine. The purpose of the subroutine is to swap the values, exchange the values of the two parameters. Now, when we invoke swap, now we have to make sure that we also specify the parameters. Now, that is one thing about parameters is if a subroutine has parameters, you are obligated to specify the values to those parameters. Okay? Is that okay? It's kind of like having an in-tray to an office. In order for the person inside the office to do something, you have to give that person something in the in-tray to process. In this case, I can specify I can use I to specify parameter X. I can use K to specify parameter Y. We'll take a look and see what this code is going to do. It almost does everything it is supposed to, except for one little thing. Okay, so we'll take a look at why I say so. Okay, so let's save the file first. By-val swap. This example illustrates the limitations of by-val parameters. There are certain things it just cannot do. There are no conditions, so there's no need for a comments column. We start with a line number. We have two global variables, I and K are both global variables. And we can just say that they start with some sort of unknown value. We'll initialize everything in our code. Line 10 initializes I to 5. Line 11 initializes K to 15. And then on line 12, we invoke the subroutine. When we invoke a subroutine, in this case, let me make these columns a little bit smaller so we can have additional space to display what happens when we invoke the subroutine. We reserve a line or we reserve a column to indicate where we are supposed to go back to. Once again, we're returning to post. That's the easy one. And now we need one column per parameter and variable. So we need 3 additional columns. One for parameter X, one for parameter Y, and one for the local variable T. The local variable is the easy one to take care of because we know it starts with some unknown value. Parameter X, the initial value of parameter X is specified by the invoke statement. The invoke statement says we have an expression I, but variable I has a value of 5, you can see here. So that's why X as a parameter is also starting with the value of 5. Parameter Y is specified by the expression K. The variable K has a value of 15. As a result, Y would start with the value of 15. Now, there are several things you have to kind of pay attention to, even now, before we go any further. Remember that I said, okay, let me point to the right part first, and then I will say it. Remember that I said the expression I and the expression K instead of the variable I and the variable K. There's a specific reason why I said that. Whatever is on this side of the arrow, on the left-hand side of the arrow to specify a parameter, can be any expression. It does not have to be a variable. In other words, if I wish to, I could say I plus K minus 10, the whole thing times 20. I can do that. Okay? I can specify a constant. I can specify 0, 5, 10, 2, whatever. In this case, it just so happens that it is just the mentioning of a single variable. And that's why I said the expression I and the expression K to specify the parameters X and Y instead of saying the variables I and the variable K. Okay. Now, right away, I think someone should notice that, so that means we are just making copies of I and K, because you can see that X has the value of I,